Hey guys, another OG blog has been released earlier today on the RuneScape homepage, which is really quite exciting. I think it was about time that they released another one of these because they contain some really useful information. Now this one is about the upcoming changes to the evolution of combat. Before I get on into the video, I'm just going to say that there's not going to be any sort of background footage or anything. I'm just going to be looking through this webpage and talking about the updates and things that they have highlighted here. So this is sort of the thing you might want to listen to while you're scaping, or if you want, you can maximize the video and just read through the updates with me. But basically what they're talking about here is that the evolution of combat has not been the most balanced piece of content at the moment, which I'm very much in agreement with. There are several things in it that really they don't strike me as a good combat system. So like things like bossing, you can stay at bosses for hours and hours and hours now, which I think is really bad. Supplies just aren't being used, which means there are way more items coming into the game than there are leaving, which is completely ruining the balance of everything in the game, which is something that obviously differs massively in RuneScape compared to the real world, but there's nothing really they can do about it. Anyway, the first thing that they've highlighted here is change the offensive capabilities of high-level bosses. As I stated a minute ago, if you've ever been to God Wars in the last, say, month and a half, you'll find that the God Wars bosses are incredibly easy at the moment. Even if you're just soloing, you can still stay there for hours, because sort of prayers and abilities, for example the defensive abilities like Rejuvenate and Regenerate, mean that you honestly don't need any supplies, and the altars there obviously mean that you can just pray there very often to get your prayer points back. And it's kind of ruining the balance of it a bit, because there are a lot of people there, which means finding a world is really quite a nightmare, as they're just so easy. So what they basically said is that at the moment, players of lower level are able to kill them and using lower leveled gear, which is very true. You can go there with basically any gear now, and it doesn't really make much difference. And so what they're doing is significantly increasing the offensive capabilities of these NPCs, which is pretty freaking awesome, because let's be honest, you don't want to just sit there taking like hundreds, which obviously 100 back in the day would be quite a high hit, but now it's pretty much nothing when your life points are generally like reaching the 10k region. So they're going to be buffing creatures, and the ones they've mentioned are the God Wars bosses and the Corporal Beast. I wouldn't be surprised though if they changed the Queen Black Dragon, because her basic just standard attacks are kind of weak at the moment. They do like maximum sort of like 100-200 hits, which isn't immensely significant, but at the same time her sort of ability hits are really quite damaging, and I reckon they need to balance that out, maybe increase her basic attacks, reduce her special attacks. So that'd be nice to know that the high level bosses are going to have a little bit of a nerf, sorry, not a nerf, a buff, and that we're going to be getting a bit of a nerf against them. But to go with that, they're saying changing the defensive value of armor. So at the moment they're saying the difference between level 70 and 80 gear is just minuscule, and it's not really worth it, and so you're going to be using the cheaper stuff for combat training and boss hunting, which means that people aren't investing in the best gear, which means that the top end gear is getting a hell of a lot cheaper, which is a bit of a, it's kind of defeats the point of hunting for it. Now they're going to be changing the defensive values of this armor so that it's an exponential curve rather than a linear curve, which means that the armor effectiveness and the gap between each tier is going to get greater and greater and greater. So the top level gear is significantly better than the gear just one tier below, which is something that's really quite needed, because obviously if you're gonna have high level gear, you're gonna be a higher level and you're gonna be hunting higher bosses, and so it's necessary to have that higher armor. And also, what would be the point in training if it was rubbish, basically? But anyway, they're just saying that they're basically gonna change these sets, so they're gonna have higher defensive armor. Now, to go along with that, the next thing is strength boosts and set effects. This is something they mentioned quite a while ago, actually. They said that this strength boost, there will be set effects for Torva Pernix and Virtus gear, which I think is kind of necessary, because at the moment there's not really much point in going for them when like Ganodermic or even just Barrow's armor is pretty much just as good. But one thing that has annoyed me a little bit is that they said it's an individual strength boost. Strength is kind of a statistic that they used in the old combat system that would affect your maximum hit, and only with melee, and so I think they really should be referring to that as damage. But anyway, that's just something that I personally feel. And not only that, not only will these sets have an effect, and I also, oh sorry, before I move on, I'm not sure whether or not this will include the gloves and boots, which aren't sort of officially part of the sets, they're sort of recent additions. But anyway, other God Wars sets, so the Bandage chestplate they've mentioned here will also get a strength boost. So I'm calling it a strength boost myself now as well. But yeah, so they'll be getting a boost, which is really nice, because at the moment armor is purely armor, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but personally I'd like it to have some sort of offensive boost, so you could choose between the defensive armor and the perhaps slightly more offensive armor. So there's, you know, there's choices there, which is something I feel is necessary. And yeah, basically, so these sets are going to be getting a little bit of a boost, which is quite nice. I think that at the moment armor just, you know, you just wear whatever's available to you. It's just kind of pointless to go for anything different. Now, the next thing that is been very widely used is the healing effects of abilities. So the shield abilities at the moment are really quite powerful. That's what's making people stay so long at these fights, because they can use rejuvenate every minute, which heals 40% of your life points, and you'd be lucky to take 40% of your life points in a whole minute. So what they're changing to the rejuvenate skill ability, they're changing it so it's got a 5-minute cooldown as opposed to a 1-minute cooldown. So they're referring to it as an infrequent emergency heal. Personally, I think if they're going to make it an emergency heal, it should be an instant massive heal, rather than the at the moment it sort of heals 200 every second or so. So personally, I reckon it's, let's say you had 10k life points, that was your maximum life points, and let's say you're on 4,000 life points, so the 40% of your maximum life points would be another 40,000. I reckon as you hit that ability, like say you just taken massive damage, like okay, I need this health instantly, it should right there and then heal you for that 4k. But at the moment that's not what it does. If they're going to make it an emergency heal, that's personally what I feel it should be. And also at the same time, they're going to be changing the regenerate, and they're reducing the effect of it by 20%. Nowhere near as much of a nerf as they have done to rejuvenate, but still it's something to perhaps mean that it's less practical in battle. But anyway, and yeah, so they're just saying that this, along with the other changes to defensive armor, will mean that food will be more necessary, which is good. Like as I said, it's going to mean that there's going to be more need for armor, sort of not armor, food in battle, which I think is kind of awesome. Now, this last bit is actually a sort of an in-game content update. So rather than just sort of changes that all of these other things have been, this here is titled Chaotic Add-on for Dragon Claws. Now, the Dragon Claws used to be sort of the thing. They were quite expensive. Like I think before they got massively nerfed, they were about 13 mil, and everyone loved them because of the special attack. But with special attacks gone, Dragon Claws don't really have their sort of the way in the game anymore. But they're saying there's going to be a new chaotic add-on for the Dragon Claws, which sounds pretty awesome. And yeah, so I assume this is going to make it equivalent to the level 80 other chaotics, but instead of being like a longsword or the rapier of it, it's going to be claws, which I think is kind of exciting. But the only issue I have with this is it going to make it sort of bound to your account once you use a chaotic add-on? So if you don't know, with the things like the Royal Crossbow, once you've bought all the Royal Crossbow pieces and put them together and forged them in front of the Queen Black Dragon, it then becomes absolutely bound to your account and you can't trade it anymore. So you've eaten up 5 mil, but you have the item forever, which I think is something that the game needs more of, obviously. But and that's the same with the Dragon Crossbow. But I don't know whether this is going to be the same with these Dragon Claws. I'm not sure whether I want it to be like that or not, but actually, I'm going to say that I do want it to be like that, because then it for sure takes the Dragon Claws out of the game. Like, not fully out of the game, but it means that they are consumed almost. And I reckon that the game needs more of that, sort of like an item sink. And more on that at the end of the video. I'm going to mention what I feel about sort of, I had an idea for an item sink, but obviously you can have a look at that once I've, well, I'll mention that once I've got to the end of the video. And finally, they're just saying the upcoming content updates relevant to this new update. They're saying that the planned Cowfight King and Rain Slayer dungeons will require both the very best equipment for effective fighting. And so basically that's Modmark's way of trying to encourage the economy by getting you to buy the items. And yeah, so that should be very exciting. Also, the way they phrase that makes me feel that the Cowfight King and Rain Slayer dungeons will be released after this this evolution of combat change, which I really hope is true. Maybe it'll be released this week, you never know. And they're just saying that the next game update will be on the week starting the 14th of January. At the top of the page they said that it would be released on the 14th, but you know, they're very inconsistent. So now, as I finish reading this post, I'm going to mention my idea of an item sink. So if you're not really interested in this idea, then you can just leave the video now, but it's a small idea I had, and it'd be kind of interesting to get some feedback on the idea. And I had the idea of disenchanting. This is the same as, basically exactly the same as the disenchanting in World of Warcraft, but effectively you would cast this disenchant, whether it would be a spell in the magic skill book or whatever, and then that item would be entirely consumed, like say your Bando's chestplate, but then in return you got some kind of, I don't know, like spell scroll or something, and you could then use that scroll on another piece of armor to give it a minor buff. So that for sure completely removes that item for the game. It's gone, and then you get this untradeable item from it in return, and you can use it on basically any other armor item or whatever, and give that item a small buff. I mean, for all I know, that could actually be the new skill, but it's just a small idea I had as an item sync, and I think it could be, something that could work. Obviously, it's a pretty crude description I've just given there, but I thought it would be kind of a reasonable idea. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. It's been just reading over this new content update. I'm really excited for it. I think it's really necessary, to be honest. I think at the moment the evolution of combat very imbalanced and it needs these changes. I'm kind of looking forward to this, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how this affects the game, and it kind of keeps it fresh in a way. I think this is a very good thing about the evolution of combat, and that they can make these changes keeping it fresh. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.